All right, Miss Ashley, it says that we are live. And I'm going to confirm that real quick here by jumping over to the Facebook and making sure we're showing up there. That our pretty faces are there for the world to see. Yes, we are. Cool. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's your boy Rafaelito coming back to you live. Dad's starting over. That's the first time I've ever done the Rafaelito thing. So, welcome everyone. For those that are new to this, my name is Ralph. You're watching this on a channel called Dad Starting Over, on an account called Dad Starting Over. I've been doing this content creation thing for years. I've authored books, and now I have a website called Help for Men. You can learn more at helpformen.com. We have a private community for men. We have courses. We have coaching. We get together in private on Zoom meetings and private discussion forums. We get together in person. Our 5th annual conference is coming up in Charleston, South Carolina next year. And then our guys in Australia are having their 3rd annual conference in Sydney coming up here in a week. Oh, that's soon. So yes, we're a real organization. Check it out. Helpformen.com, and the HFM Brotherhood is what we call our private organization. But enough about me. With me today is Miss Ashley Cox. Ashley, who the heck are you? What are you doing here? Tell us all about yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me. So, I have been working with men for 4.5 years, specifically men who have nice guy syndrome, men who typically they kind of on the outside look like they've got it all together, they're holding things together pretty well, they're kind of acting, and then behind the scenes, they are really struggling. They're struggling with their confidence, with their self-esteem. That takes a toll on their relationships. Sometimes, it takes a toll on their money and the amount of money they can make, not always, but usually I would say there's going to be something going on at home at a bare minimum where, he's doing everything he can to make his partner happy. And it always feels like it's just never enough for her. He gets frustrated, he's exhausted. And, he has a history of perfectionism or, wanting to be the hero, wanting to be the savior, and wanting to save the day. And to feel like it's just never enough for her is really emotional and just kind of makes him start to shut down or try harder. And it just gets worse and worse. And eventually he finds me and we talk about the root causes of that. So, something usually it happened in childhood, if not multiple things. Often I don't find that they had a crazy traumatic childhood. But we could talk more about that in a little bit, kind of the patterns that I see there and what
Mm-hmm.
causes the nice guy syndrome. And, what is the difference between just being a good man and showing up for the people that you love and having nice guy syndrome to the point where, you've got these other symptoms happening.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy?
Yes.
He's a friend of ours. We've done chats with him, and we did a live event with him. And I asked him all about the nice guy syndrome. And as I was reading the book and I've talked to people, I was like, Dr. Glover, this really is kind of teetering towards what you would call codependency. And he said, no, Ralph, it is codependency. That's exactly what it is. It's a new name for codependency. And, if he put a book out there called Codependency No More for Men or whatever, it wouldn't sell. But No More Mr. Nice Guy is something that so many men can relate to, the topic of Mr. Nice Guy. Now, a lot of women hear that and say, what the hell's wrong with being nice? We're just telling all these guys to be assholes. Like, no, no, no. It's a colloquialism for a pushover, weakling, no boundaries. Yes, dear, whatever you say, dear. Slump your shoulders kind of guy at work, at home, whatever. The guy that just lets the world walk all over him, and he wonders why he doesn't get what he wants out of life. And so what you're doing is huge. And there are so many men that are listening to this going, I know exactly what Miss Ashley's talking about. So, as a young gal, what in the world got you into this world of helping out nice guys?
Yeah, so to your point, real quick, it absolutely is codependency, and I learned that very, very quickly. And I think of it as the study of leadership. So the way that I, solve the problem is we're going from codependency to leadership, starting with self-leadership, and then, leading your inner child, leading yourself, and then eventually leading your relationship. And for some men, leading your community or leading your company or your movement or whatever it is. But it really helps to put those leadership principles in place. And I do have a history of um, of leading, and we can go more into that later if you'd like. So to your point, to your question about how I got started, I was in a relationship with a quote unquote nice guy, someone who I had friend zoned for, gosh, 15 years. And since we were 12 in middle school, he, was kind of insecure. He was like chubby when we were kids. He was my friend, and I guess he had the biggest crush on me, and I had no idea, but he was too afraid to like put himself out there and tell me, and then we grew up. We maintained contact that whole time. I mean, we would stay on the phone for hours, and he'd send me flowers sometimes, like if I had a surgery or, whatever. Um, and then when we got older, we both moved to Texas at different times and started dating. And I really craved for him to set boundaries. And so I remember feeling like, man, I just really, really wish, like, he's an amazing guy. Like he'll do anything for me. I just really, really wish he would set boundaries. And now, having studied everything that I've studied, I understand that it's not just the boundaries. It was also wanting to feel his power, wanting to feel his edge, wanting to feel his no, and to feel essentially penetrated emotionally and energetically. Like for him to take up space around me and not be afraid to
Mm.
take up space. Having waited so long to date me, he would shrink. He would sort of like give me whatever I wanted. He didn't want me to leave, like he didn't want me to abandon him or reject him. He still had some inner child stuff. And so like he was kind of, it was a little bit boring, I have to say, because there was no like there was no edge. Like, where's the boundary here? Um, and it also, on an unconscious level, feels a little unsafe as a woman to be with a man who, um, won't tell you no. And it's like the unconscious thing there is, well, if he can't tell me no, can he tell the world no? And if he can't tell the world no, how can he keep me safe? And so him not having boundaries and not being able to say no was really not only boring, but also scary for me. And it put me into a masculine state where my head was on a swivel and I didn't feel like I could really like relax into him. And we both did a lot of work. We broke up, did a lot of work, and actually we're back together. Things are great. We're on track
Oh,
to be
wow.
married and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, fast
Cool.
forward.
Interesting.
But yeah, yeah. But we've had to put a lot of work in, and we had
Hmm.
to learn the hard way, everything that I teach. So, anyways, right around our first breakup, that's when I went into a deep meditation for about 3 weeks and just prayed and was like, God, how can I help people? I had a coaching company before, and I knew how to do it, and I was just like, what's next for me? What do you want me to do? And what I felt like I was told was that the patriarchy has hurt men just as much as it's hurt women, and that's not a political statement. It's really just a statement to say that men haven't had safe spaces to,
Mm.
be vulnerable, to share their emotions, to talk about what's going on for them, in the way that women have. It's much more socially acceptable for women to go process what's going on for them, and so essentially, what you have is this like pressure cooker effect where men are shoving everything down, and the women feel like, oh, he's emotionally unavailable, right? But in his mind, he's like, if I go there, I don't know if I'm going to come back from it. There's so much stuff buried. I feel like I'm going to blow up. I don't know if I'm like, what's going to happen if I really let myself go there.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. And so yeah, and so I wanted to create a safe space, and it's been that ever since. It's an international company. I've had many, many clients. I've spoken to over 2,500 men, and if you include DMs, it's probably double that. But I've consulted and actually coached probably 300 or 400 at this point internationally. And these are men who go from being friend zoned or being in a terrible marriage, being abused, etc., to completely taking their power back, to cultivating their discipline, and really just getting a handle on life in a way where they feel like they're in control.
That's awesome. Bravo to you. Kudos. You're doing a lot of good work, helping a lot of guys, because this is this codependency, Mr. Nice Guy thing. Last time I spoke to Dr. Glover about this, I said, from when he wrote that book 20 some odd years ago to now, you would expect with, this kind of information out in the zeitgeist, if you will, especially with the information that we would see a lot of men doing better. But oh no, it's getting worse and worse and worse. As far as, if we had a graph for nice guys, it's going like this. And you got to ask, what the heck's going on here? And you alluded to it at the beginning in the intro. Bingo, the whole family issues, childhood issues. From my perspective, talking to so many men, that's it. That's everything. It's all about what happened when they were a little boy. Mom and dad, the dynamic that they witnessed with mom and dad, their past relationship experiences has completely molded them into what they see now, which is Mr. Nice Guy. And it's getting them absolutely nowhere. A lot of men are very resistant to the whole notion of, really, it's a psychology thing we're talking about. Lay down on the couch, let's work this out and talk about where this came from. A lot of men are like, oh God, here we go with the wounded child nonsense, blah, 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 blah. It's much easier, Ashley, to say from the hurt male perspective, and that's who we're talking about. A lot of guys have been badly hurt because usually what goes along with this is a string of being cheated on, broke up, got their heart broken, whatever it may be, belittled at the workspace, whatever it may be. It's much easier to lash out at the other, and often the other in our world is women. It's women only like creeps, not creeps, excuse me, bad boys. That's the term. Women only like bad boys, which is another word for extroverted, low anxiety men who aren't afraid to say what it is they're feeling. There's some truth to that. Women only like certain types of guys who have certain looks, certain money, etc. There's no hope for nice guys or good guys like me. They just step all over me and use me and so forth. That's the easy way out. Just to wash your hands of the whole thing and just say, I'm out. Way more difficult to say, maybe there's something about little old me that's causing some of this, at least some of this, if not all of this problem. So do you find that men are more apt to wake up, pay attention, and take that in from a lady as opposed to a guy like myself? Do you think you have an edge in that world?
I'm laughing. I was muted, so you couldn't hear it, but yeah, yeah. So what I've found is that often my clients don't have close male friends,
Mm,
and they're much more comfortable with women. I find that very interesting. It's not
yes.
something I expected going into it, but it also makes sense, and is kind of related to the root problem of what is causing the nice guy syndrome, honestly. So it's a blessing and a curse, and that it brings them in, but so it's like the thing that brings them in is probably not great. Like whatever causes it in childhood, like his own discomfort with his own masculinity, and the fact that he may have never shifted his emotional anchor from his mom to his dad, and then eventually to his friends. And so he's still mentally and emotionally in some level sort of stuck in a certain place where he's only comfortable with women. And so while that may not be awesome for him, what is awesome is that it brings him to me so we can work on it. And yeah, and I think that there's something to be said for finally feeling heard and seen by a woman, having a safe space. Specifically that's held by a woman. It's very, very, very rare in our society, for men to have a safe space at all, much less with a woman. And so on some level, just experiencing that, can be healing.
Yeah, I think it's from your perspective, a double-edged positive sword here, if you will, of there's the nurturing, maternal, mothering kind of aspect to it that a lot of men are attracted to. And then there's also in essence, you actually possibly represent the end goal of the woman that he would like to be with in a long-term relationship. So I would like to get with a woman in a long-term relationship, and here's a woman saying, I have potentially some of the keys to help you achieve that. Wonderful. So it's a double positive thing, and there's something that any kind of female content creator that I've talked to has told me the same thing, and I've noticed the same thing. If you are giving pro-male, or at least not anti-male, sympathetic to the male cause, plight, whatever, from a female perspective. In other words, if there's a lady saying, guys, I hear you, and let me give you some advice, men stand up and take attention and just say, oh, now I'm paying attention. They love hearing women talk about men's issues. Absolutely love it. And that's no slight against you or anything else. It's just that's why I like to bring on a lot of ladies to my channel. It kind of wakes men up to say, oh, Here's something I listen to. So, and they get tired of seeing my dumb bald head over and over again. So I love what you're doing. It's such a great thing. It's interesting. You went from the past in your coaching experience, and then you saw in your own personal world, wow, there's something here, something going on with your, if he's here now, husband. Is that right?
We're on track for
You're okay.
that.
Engaged to be. Okay.
Yeah.
Fiancé.
hmm
Okay. Very
hmm
good. That's awesome. And so you saw in your personal life that, and then you turned in turn said, I think there's something to this on a wide scale, and turn that to a legitimate business. That's awesome. So good for you. Let me pause here for a moment. I don't see any comments yet. Guys, we're being awful quiet today. I hope people are joining us today. At least in my window, I don't see. I hope it's working properly. Let me, yeah, it looks like we're doing good here. I'm going to refresh to make sure there's no technical difficulties. Usually we have something by now. I say all this and you scared them away, Ashley. Way to go. Okay. So guys, if you could give me a like. Let me know where you're watching us from, YouTube, Facebook, where in the world you are. I would appreciate it. Any comments at all, any questions at all for myself or Miss Ashley, whether it's about the nice guy thing, anything in general in the relationship realm, please do not be shy. Would love to hear from you guys. At least give us a thumbs up. There we go. Somebody gave us a thumbs, so we know you're alive out there. Thank you so much. All the likes help. That tells the YouTubes and Facebook of the world that this is worthy of other people seeing it. So it'll start popping up on other people's feeds. There we go. And Miss Rita is a frequent follower, watcher, whatever of mine, and she says just listening, and she just came in late. So welcome, Rita. Thank you so very much. Anybody else? Any guys? Let me ask this for any guys in the comments that are watching. Anybody in the audience? How many can relate to this whole nice guy thing? How many can say, "Oh yeah, I know all about that"? Have you been walked on, stepped on? Here's a phrase. Ashley, tell me if guys have told you this. You're such a nice guy. You're such a good guy, is what a lot of people will hear. And what a lot of men will hear, rather. And they will hear that from who? From the woman they're trying to woo and trying to get into a romantic / sexual relationship with. And so he'll try to cross the line into the romantic / erotic side of things, as opposed to the platonic, friendly side of things. And he just can't get over that hump. And he pushes and pushes in his own little nice guy way. And the common phrase to put the wall up from the woman to say, that ain't you, buddy, is, you're such a good guy. You're such a nice guy. And every man knows, oh, there's the death blow, because we know what's coming next. I'm sorry, I just don't have those kind of feelings for you. It's not going to go there. I'm sorry. You know, I like you a lot, and you're a great guy. You're really, really awesome, dude. You're a super nice guy, but it can't go there. And then men do the whole, and then, 2 weeks later, I saw her out with a guy who in their mind is just the wrong man for her. And then again, the jump in the logic is, well, women just tend to like what's bad for them. They don't know what's good for them. Because if they knew what's good for them, Ashley, they would go with a man like me, Mr. Nice Guy, Mr. Good Guy. Anybody in the comments? There we go. People are coming alive here. Can anybody relate to that whole mindset? Something that's pretty common. Ashley's nodding because we hear that again and again and again from the guys out there. Mr. Jason saying, thought I was just being, quote, being a good husband, but was too far one side of it. Yeah, there you go. It's easy for us in today's day and age, us men, to take a good thing and just snowball it into something huge that quickly becomes a very negative thing. We want to be Mr. Provider. I want to, go out and work my butt off and prove to my family that I can do that and put a roof over everybody's head. In today's day and age, usually it's like a 50-50 thing between he and the wife. But still, we get a lot of our purpose from that. I'm a good father, gosh darn it. I coach every team, and I help with the homework, and I do all this and that. And I'm a good co-parent / husband in terms of domestic duties and everything else. And it's very, very easy, Ashley, when you're caught in what I call the family machine, which it's so easy to get lost in that. And then you lose who? Your sense of self. And I think nice guys are especially susceptible to that condition of losing themselves, because all these little actions are all pointing outward. I'm trying to prove to wife that I'm a good hubby, good father. I'm trying to prove these kids this. I'm trying to prove to my employer that I'm a good worker. I'm trying to prove. And there's nothing left in themselves. And it's 10:30 at night every night, and they're just like, I haven't done a damn thing for myself. I don't even know who I am anymore. That's a big component of it. The people-pleasing codependent thing it's very natural for us to lose ourselves in parenthood. Any woman will tell you this, like they've lost their sense of self. I don't know who I am anymore. I'm just this breastfeeding, baby carrying machine. Who am I? And then that lasts for, in some semblance, for the next 18 years until the kid goes out of the house. It's very easy to lose yourself, and us, the nice guys, tend to have a really difficult time with that. Rita says, maybe we are too fickle. She says, a nice guy is important, but he has to be really confident too. Yes, sometimes nice guys are pushovers. Yeah, Rita, you're a little late in this. We, at the intro, talked about that's the definition for us, what a nice guy is, in essence, a guy with no boundaries, Mr. Pushover. Just people pleaser. That's a term I often use, just trying to please everybody else. The term was made popular in a book 20 some odd years ago from Dr. Robert Glover called No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's basically a codependent guy, just trying to please everybody and doesn't really stick up for himself ever. And it is not the most attractive thing ever, no. A kind guy is attractive. A good guy is attractive. Yeah, but so is you tell me, Ashley, will an outgoing, confident, not afraid to stick up for himself and say what it is he feels, will that trump the truly good guy every time if the truly good guy has no boundaries?
Yeah. Yeah, because at a woman's core, what she's looking for from a man is for him to protect, right? Like if you look at how we're built biologically, the woman, when we have a baby on her hip, we can't fight the bear, right? And so on a deep level, we're looking for someone who has an edge, who can say no, who has his head on a swivel, who has discernment, who has boundaries, who has discipline, all the things that you need to have in order to protect. Not the guy who isn't paying attention, is just letting anyone and anything in, right? Who doesn't have boundaries, who doesn't know what he wants, doesn't have a sense of direction and yes or no, or what's right for him, what his principles, what his values are. Um, and you have to have a sense of identity for that. If you have spent your whole life people pleasing, then you lose your identity because you've become who everybody else wants you to be, right? And so if you don't have a sense of identity, how can you make decisions? And if you can't make decisions, how can you keep the family safe and protected?
Let me play devil's advocate here for a moment. By the way, I agree with 1,000% of what you just said. Devil's advocate. Yes, but Miss Ashley, you're speaking from a very antiquated, old-timey mindset. What you're getting at is that we all have some kind of embedded programming within us. That basically what you're saying is nature says, here's your cards. You're a woman. These are your feelings, and this is your predisposition towards what you're looking for a mate. Here you go, man. Here are your cards. Haven't we overcome some of this as a people over the past so many generations of societal change? Doesn't that trump some of this?
I'd say if we had overcome it by now, we wouldn't have as many men as we have, like, hooked on porn, right? It's very difficult to fight biology, right? And to override it. Now, if you tell the women, they might tell you, "Oh, yeah, I can do anything a man can do," and it's like, "Well, ma'am, go lift, not lift, but build the power line, then, please. Go to the oil rig, right? Go unload that 18 wheeler. Like if, oh, and by the way, don't mess up your manicure while you're doing it, your $40 manicure or whatever, right? So if anyone wants to sort of make the argument that we're the same, you can easily dismantle that. Look at the way our brain is wired. There's a lot of it that's the same, but some of it's different. Some of it's different. Men, their brain is more like the hemispheres don't talk to each other as much, right? So, and then they are also wired to, like, when there's a threat, to execute the threat or to handle the threat. That's why emotions can be really hard, because if I feel these emotions, I don't know how I'm going to react to it, right? My brain wants to do something about it. And the answer that my brain comes up with is not always the best answer, for how to handle these emotions, right? That's, in my opinion, why we see a suicide rate that's 4 times out of women, because it just seems like an answer to the emotions, right? It's a way to solve that problem. And that's not the only reason, but one big reason. Men, their brain works better when something is moving. The quicker it's moving, the better they are at identifying it. And it's, for example, like if you're hunting and you have to shoot an arrow, right? And women, not so much. And so, biologically, our brain is different. We have different hormones. Women obviously have a 28-day or thereabout hormone cycle. Men have a 24-hour hormone cycle. And so men are much more equipped for the traditional 9 to 5, wake up, go to work, go to sleep, wake up, go to work, go to sleep, that sort of thing, having 2 days off. Whereas women, we can crank out a bunch of work a couple of weeks out of a month and then need to rest. And we'll wear our bodies down if we don't honor that. And what we're seeing is, very high rates of infertility, very high rates of women having like being on depression medicine.
Mm.
Um, like just people really going against biology instead of working with it. Hyper independence is a modern day luxury. We are designed to be interdependent, and so when we work against that, something's got to give.
Very good. And just thinking all kinds of questions as you're talking, but David is a good segue into what I was thinking. He says, Ashley, what is the response from your female friends or followers regarding what you do for men? Do you get pretty positive reaction from the ladies, or do a lot of ladies look at this kind of like, oh, Ashley, what are you doing?
When I started, it was not positive. When I started, it was like, wait, are you being a prostitute? No, what the heck?
What?
I have a master's in teaching. Like, why
Why
would
would
I?
wait?
How do
Why would they jump from that to prostitution of all things? Okay, all right, whatever.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Yes. And nowadays we've got OnlyFans, and so it's kind of like actually they weren't too far off. Like,
Yeah,
who
exactly.
knows?
So, mhm.
Um, so yeah, so at first it was like, what are you doing? Why? What? The men like, and it was inconceivable because I was doing this. So I actually had never heard of Dr. Glover when I started. It was
Oh
just
wow.
completely, yeah, this work was born out of my own personal experience. And men at the time, men's work, like it wasn't cool, it wasn't popular. And so hearing not only someone say, "Oh, I'm going to talk to men about their feelings and their problems and what's going on for them," but me being a woman on top of it was like it broke people's brain. Like, wait, what? Like, it couldn't, it cannot calculate, cannot compute, sort of thing. And ever since then, like you said, there's sort of been this hockey stick effect with men's work, which is excellent, but that wasn't the case when I started for sure. Um, and now, I think that there's a healthy respect, and this is a little bit of assumptions here, but I'm not the person that the ladies come to like talk shit about their husband, right? So I'm the one that they come to if they actually want a solution. If there's something actually bothering them that they're like, oh, I really just need advice on this, but
Hmm.
I'm not the one that is going to sit around and be like, oh yeah, your husband ain't shit. I can't believe that. Like it's not, and I don't have lady friends that do that anyways, but when I go to like big parties and when they all start finding out what I do, you know, they're like, oh, like there's this sort of like intense curiosity. Oh, I have to pick your brain. I have questions. Or it's like, ooh, like she's not
Hmm.
gonna she's not gonna fit in with the rest of what we're talking about. And then, men, I think men just generally appreciate it. I've never had any weird responses from men, just like, oh, that's cool, or wow, seeing your Facebook. I have friends in real life who see my Facebook and go, wow, your Facebook makes me feel so seen and heard, like that your posts are, because it's not stuff I sit around and talk with my friends about, like, unless they ask me. I don't want to inundate them with psychology, like I'm just trying to eat my pizza, chill, Ashley. So they'll go to my Facebook and look at my stuff. Yeah.
Very good. And here's a sensitive issue, but just curious. I don't know if some of your language may paint you as being maybe a little bit more conservative than the maybe typical gal your age in your part of the world. Where in the world are you, if I may ask?
So I am right outside of Austin. I'm in Texas,
Oh, okay.
about 45 minutes outside of Austin. So not in the city with all the blue-haired people, not there. But interestingly enough, we live like I don't, this is probably too much information for the internet. We live near Willie Nelson's. It's a very integrated community of conservatives and liberals,
Cool.
but a lot of respect. There's really no drama around it. And that's the
Hmm.
thing about Texas is that like they'll really do a good job of respecting each other.
Yeah.
Um, I would say I'm definitely more on the like traditional side in terms of the direction I'd like to see the world go in. I'd like to see women and men come together and work together again and not hate each other's guts. I have been fully indoctrinated as a young woman into the hyper independent culture of women, listening to Beyonce. I used to have a Rosie the Riveter poster in my room. My dad, I saw him every other weekend, and
Mm.
my mom was 15 when she got pregnant with me.
Oh, wow.
And so I grew up really, really fast and had to take care of myself at a really young age, and my sister. And so I grew up with this sort of mindset of like, if I don't do it, no one will. No one's coming to save me. So
Mm.
I need to get good grades. I got my master's when I was 22. I got a bunch of awards. I was in JRTC and was the top cadet and won awards on the East Coast and stuff. And so like I was fully in this independent woman,
Hmm.
thing. And literally, if I remember thinking as a kid, if there was something like I was on the boys wrestling team, they said on the announcement, anybody who wants to wrestle. And I was like, well, if boys can do it, I can do it too. And so I went to the meeting and I was the first girl. So that was my whole thing,
Hmm.
was like
Hmm.
proving that I could. And I've really, especially after having worked with men, I've come around to realize, oh my gosh, men actually care and want me to be happy and want to protect and want to provide. I actually didn't have that belief. I didn't think that men cared or
Mm.
would. I didn't realize it was so important for a man to make me happy. That was like his whole thing is like, how can I win with you? Like, I didn't know that as a kid and growing up, and I saw a lot of bad examples from the men that my mom would date, and so
Mm.
like I had really had no idea. Um,
Interesting.
yeah.
What I was getting at was, do you see some divide in response to what it is that you do? Some maybe your more conservative people are like, woohoo, and while your more leftist types are like, ugh, I don't know about this. That's what I would knee jerk think that would be the response.
Um, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I'm trying to think of my friends and like their political beliefs and how they respond. Um, I'd say so. I mean, I don't have a ton of, not just in real life, but even online, I don't have a ton of friends who are liberal who know what I do, who are super interested or all about it or
Mm.
like rooting for it. I haven't had any sort of negative, uh, you know,
That's good.
but I also probably exist in some sort of echo chamber. So,
I
yeah.
just did I just posted in the chat on YouTube the chat, and then the comments on Facebook will show up here shortly. I did an interview with Forbes earlier this week about divorced men in the upcoming election. They were seeing trends in who was going to vote for Trump, and they were seeing the majority of divorced men said yay Trump, and so they interviewed me to see why it is I thought that was the case, and it was interesting. I consider myself a pretty centrist guy. Where do you fall on this? Well, it depends on the issue. I'm not going to be Mr. one way or the other. And so,
Right.
how strange, how odd that is these days. But it was interesting, the interview. And Jack, for example, in our comments here, he commented on that video. It was obvious from the beginning that there was a biased slant to it, so to speak. They were rooting for some not so good stuff to say. I tried my best to keep it down the middle as much as I could, but there's most definitely what I see in our world, Help for Men world, comments on my stuff. I can definitely see a slant towards the more conservative side when it comes to pro-male stuff. That's unfortunate that we don't see much from the more progressive side, more pro-male. In fact, the knee-jerk thought from that side is more of, if it veers in that direction, it must be bad. If somebody out there is saying go men, then here comes the follow up to that, which is some kind of over the top misogyny, women suck, yada yada. It's like, do we have to go there with it? So I put the link in the comments there, guys. If you could give that a watch and give that a like, that'll help spread the word. Forbes was nice enough to have me on. They treated me well. I have no complaints with it whatsoever. But it was obvious there was kind of a political slant to it. And the woman I chatted with was the Forbes editor-chief of Forbes Women. So she was obviously some little bias there. But again, I was very thankful to be on there. Make sure we're not missing something here in the comments. Yep. Jack, wondering if he was late? No, never too late. If you ever come in any one of these lives, Jack, or any others, you're more than welcome to ask a question at any point in time during this. Usually they go about an hour, sometimes a little shorter or longer, but yeah, you are welcome to comment. Rita says, great conversation. Well, thank you, Miss Rita. Appreciate you. Where else can we go with this conversation with the nice guy and everything else? We've discussed the politics. Oh, by the way, I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So there you go. Not too far from you.
Nice.
I'm in Plano.
Nice.
So I know the Texas world well. It's interesting you talk about your past being very independent, I can take care of myself type. And I don't think it's a coincidence, Miss Ashley, that you connected with a Mr. Nice Guy type. Do you?
No, no, not at all.
Hmm.
No, I think that I was a nice guy magnet. Being really in my masculine and really independent. Um, there was, and if you want more to talk about, I've plenty about this, but there was this piece of wanting my validation and approval. And let me tell you, like I said, growing up really quickly and seeing some stuff that I really shouldn't have seen growing up and being in like life-threatening situations and lots of abuse and stuff, I really had a mind of my own. I really did, because you have to. You have to. And so there was something interesting psychologically about wanting the approval and validation of like a strong-willed woman, right? Um, Someone who ultimately, I would say that I was very insecure, and these guys are insecure as well. It's just, and it looks very different. I was insecure on the spectrum of having narcissistic traits, right? And then also depending on the person, codependent traits depend, like I would switch off. So like
Hmm.
if there was someone to save, I was all about it. And I would want to save that person, right? So I dated one guy who was a former Marine, heavy, heavy, heavy drinker, probably should have been in some sort of rehab facility. I invested. I spent $150,000 trying to help him. Yes.
Wow.
And I was on a teacher salary at the time. So I was working 4 jobs. And then when I started dating a nice guy, I went way over to the like crazy toxic controlling side, unempathetic. Like so interesting the difference there and how I sort of responded differently. But in both cases, I was deeply, deeply insecure. And gosh, that could probably be a psychological study in and of itself, and how I sabotaged someone who was actually trying to love me and chased someone who didn't. Um, but yeah, and I think that the nice guys do the same, right?
Yeah.
There's something when you have deep childhood trauma or deep insecurities or whatever, where you're trying to get someone to love you who simply just isn't invested, or they're repelled even by it, because ultimately what it is, it's your inner child who is running the show, not the man, right? So what I tell my clients all the time is we have to put your inner child in the passenger seat. He's not allowed to make decisions anymore. Um, you know, until you do that, he's the one who needs the approval and the validation and things like that. And like I said earlier, we're seeing societally speaking, and again, this goes back to the politics thing. From a societal level, when we start to level out the playing field, and um, the divorce rate is as high as it is, women can get their own job, women can do whatever they like. There's nothing wrong with that. We haven't addressed the other side of the coin, which is, okay, now how about the men, right? Um, and what we're seeing is the men like don't know where they fit in. They don't know what their role is. They don't know how to provide and what their purpose is right now. But women, are relatively self-sufficient. Now, that being said, men are responsible for building the infrastructure, right? So they're sort of working along in the background while everybody else benefits and thinks that they're independent, but we all still need men.
Hmm.
Um, and what we're seeing is boys who, because the family dynamic has really been just destroyed, a lot of boys are growing up without a strong father figure. So he may be around, but he's passive. He may be around, but he's abusive, the father, or he may just not be around at all. And so what happens is around the age of 6 or 7, if the father is not ready to initiate the boy into his manhood and like teach the boy principles and values and confidence and There's so much that goes into that, but little boys are looking for answers to these questions. They want to know how they can be good enough, and they're wondering where they fit into the pecking order, right? It's very, again, kind of tribal. And so, um, if the dad's not around to do that and fill that role, then the young boy doesn't ever graduate. So his emotional anchor stays with the mom. So
Mm.
around 6 or 7, it shifts from the mom to the dad. And it has to shift for him to start to build that confidence internally. Mom can't coddle him forever, right? Because he won't develop and cultivate the masculinity and the confidence that he needs. So basically, if he never shifts, what does he do the rest of his life? He seeks validation and approval from women because he's never differentiated and like separated from the mom psychologically and cultivated his own confidence. So for example, dad would take the boy out, for example, and teach him how to fish or teach him how to hunt. And maybe the boy has a hard time at first, but the dad is like, I've got your back. I love you no matter what. You've got this. It's okay if you fail. We'll try again. I'm going to teach you. That process is super, super important, not just to learn how to fish and hunt, but for the little boy's sense of self-esteem and for it to be intrinsically sourced instead of coming from the mom. And then once the self-esteem is intact, then he'll be more comfortable being in a group of other men, right? So then around 14, 15, he graduates to like his friends, his peer group, his community, which is why when we talked about, men being more comfortable working with me as a woman, these are men who never went through that process. And so they're uncomfortable being around men because they're lacking the confidence, they're lacking that
Mhm.
intrinsic confidence. And that's the same reason that they're attracting the women they're attracting as well, and why they're running into relationship issues.
Very well put. We see this all the time where I'll talk to a guy, and this is no slight against stay at home fathers, for example, or anyone that's like in a non traditional kind of role, but we will see often those men that kind of take a subordinate role, for lack of a better term, in their marriage. And you will listen to a description of their wife, and she's usually very type A, professional, CEO level, or some kind of high executive, or a doctor or something like that. My wife is a surgeon, by the way, so I can speak to this world well. And what we often see romantically with these guys is, well, there is no romance. Basically, the woman is what they call in psych circles very avoidant in nature. She's been very hyper independent her entire life, was never able to trust anyone except herself. So she's not about to be open sexually, emotionally with somebody and vulnerable in that way. She doesn't want to hear it. Just leave her alone, let her do her thing. And she's paired up with, ironically, the most needy, anxious dude on the planet Earth who's like, I need constant reassurance that you love me. I need constant reassurance that we're okay. When I sit across the table from you and I see you have a not so happy look on your face, I have to fix it like now immediately. And it doesn't bode well for the clash of the two worlds. It doesn't bode well for the romance between the two. But we see that. Shoot, I don't know. That's like 3/4 of the guys in our group basically have that dynamic in some way. So super, super common and very interesting to hear it from the other side of the table, the other person's perspective, the person who said, yeah, that was me. And the fact that you're doing probably continuous active work to battle against that. The analogy I often use is one of, it's like this concept of baggage that we all bring to the table. It's like literally luggage that's in the back of your car, and there's so much of it that it throws off the weight distribution of the car. And so you're driving down the road, and if you take your hand off the wheel, you go off the road and you crash into the trees and you die. So you have to make constant course corrections and keep your hand on the wheel, know when to put on the brake, know when to accelerate, and that doesn't stop. You always have to do that from now until the day you die. That's called having baggage and dealing with it. And that's what I found, that most people just don't do that. It's very easy just to take your hand off and go, well, whatever happens, happens. And that's what we see with a lot of guys all through their life. When I say, I hear these guys that describe really toxic, for lack of a better term, dysfunctional, chaotic marriages to a woman who's objectively like bad news. And you're like, what in the world were you doing with that gal? And I said, what is it that, Bob, what is it that caused you to choose Mary as your wife all those many years ago? And she was like one of the guys. She was very low in chaos. She was very low drama. I could talk to her about anything. She was just cool, calm, and collected. And then we had our honeymoon phase, which wasn't the best in the world. This is what usually these guys say. but it was something. And then, man, as soon as we had kids and got married, that just went and just, plummeted, flatlined, nothing. We have nothing anymore. That's what I hear often from the guys is she was just one of the guys. And then combined with the reason I married is just because it's just what you do. I'm 26 years of age. Everybody says, "Why aren't you married yet?" Oh, I don't know. I guess married. You want to marry me? Okay. That's about as all the thought they put into it. And why did you have 8 kids? Well, because Mary wanted to have 8 kids. And did you? Not really. No, I was, I was happy with no kids. And he's just like, whatever. That's in essence the nice guy's mantra is, whatever. That's fine. No biggie. Meanwhile, in his head, he's like yelling, "No, I don't want to do this." But he's, whatever. Gets you in a lot of trouble. And Daniel says, "There's Mr. Daniel. I don't know if you know Daniel. That'd be a good person for you to collaborate with, Daniel Robertson. We did a live yesterday. Relationship coach, Mr. Daniel. Welcome." Jack is saying he's more or less lived this in all his extended family of origin. Yeah, welcome to the club, Mr. Jack. Fight for Better Now saying, is it possible to build a missing man skills back in via I'm doing actions that require growth in a growth mindset? Well, yeah, that's what we're talking about. Is it too late to put some missing pieces of the puzzle here? No. That's something I get across to a lot of guys, especially post-divorce. You can be whoever the hell you want to be, dude. You're Mr. Walked all over. People have just, stepped on you or whatever at work and romantic relationships. All it takes is to go, not anymore. And then from there you build. But you have to do the whole, not anymore, and be serious about it. That's what it takes to get this kind of stuff done. So yeah, absolutely, you can start over and be whoever they want to be. Fight for Better Now, from what I've seen, yes. Okay, so make sure I'm not missing anything here. Great conversation. Thank you. Guys, if you could, give us a like, give us a share. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could give me a subscribe, that would be really cool. And a like, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I posted earlier in the chat and in the comments a link to the Forbes video. If you could click on over to that after we're done here and give that a like, maybe subscribe to Forbes, that would be really cool. Daniel says, or Jack says that Daniel, our stream yesterday was awesome. So good job, Daniel. Other issues. Where else to take the conversation, Miss Ashley? This is one of those things where there's so many facets to this that you and I could just sit down with a drink and talk for, I don't know, a week and never run out of stuff to talk about. That's how kind of like you go, oh yeah. It just goes on, and it's so intermingled with everything. The romantic side of things. We've been talking about the romantic and the relationship side of things. How does the nice guy syndrome affect these guys professionally? What have you seen?
Yeah, so it depends on what profession they're in, obviously. So if they are entrepreneurs or if they are, working a 9 to 5 or something in between. My clients who are in charge of their own money and like either they're a CEO or they get commissions, um, they always make more money and they don't even change anything on the outside because let me tell you, they already have their T's crossed and their I's dotted. That's just kind of how they roll, right? But when they open their heart and when they have intrinsic confidence and they're less attached to the outcome, um, things just start to flow. And I don't know what it is. It's just it almost it's just really cool to see, honestly. I had a client just yesterday. We were talking. He was on Voxer, and he had a good cry. And then he's like, "Okay, I have to get myself together, go have this big meeting." And then later, he texted me back, and he goes, "I just made millions of dollars." I was like, "Maybe you should cry more often," because what he told me it was like, "Oh, I never cry," and I'm like, "This is probably a good,
Yeah.
maybe it's a sign that you're heading in the right direction." But people feel it, and they feel they feel like it's an authentic relationship and not a transactional relationship. They feel like they can be themselves because they don't have to walk on eggshells to make you comfortable since you're insecure or super attached or what have you. There's a lot to be said for it. Clients who are in like a 9 to 5 situation, they'll often change jobs. So, they'll wake up kind of and go, oh, these people have been taking advantage of me for years and I've been
Mm-hmm.
let, right? Or treating me poorly or whatever.
And so they start applying and then they'll like land this awesome job and you're like, oh my gosh, this is so much better. But it's interesting how it doesn't occur until they shift their identity. So, like, when their identity shifts and they feel more confident, their self worth comes online, their self respect comes online, then all of a sudden, that's when they feel the sort of record scratch, if you will. And it makes them kind of wake up and go, oh, you're actually, it's not just me who is not good enough. And so I need to work harder. It's you who's taken advantage of that, right? And as soon as I start to set boundaries and tell you, no, I'm not going to work 50 hours, a day or whatever for you, like then, if you get upset, it's like my sign to go, right? Because you've just gotten so used to milking me, so to speak. I have a friend who was on the board of a hospital. She's been on multiple boards. And I'll tell you something that she probably won't ever, ever, ever say publicly. And I could never tell you her name and I could never tell you what hospital she works for. We were sitting there, I was helping her set up her new office. She just bought a house. And we were talking about nice guys. And she goes, the men and women who are deeply insecure and never feel good enough will work the hardest for you. And all you have to do is be just a tiny bit disproving of whatever they've done and they'll work harder.
Interesting. Wow. Somewhat manipulative, but that's interesting. Yeah. It's something I've been talking about here recently is the sales game, for example. That is such a microcosm of watching how a certain personality type succeeds over another in sales. And the nice guy persona doesn't lend itself well to sales. And what I've seen is that they get in their own way. A typical nice guy will over ruminate and think of reasons why he can't make a sale, for example. All these things that get in the way of success. The stereotypical, I used to work for a big company. I used to go all over the place to dealerships for this big company and watch salespeople at work. And you could always pick the top dude. He was always the same archetype. Laid back, confident. He's obviously the head dude when he walks into the room. Everybody looks up to him. Simple, not to the point of being like, simple-minded, but to his coworkers, they would probably tell you like he's not the brightest dude in the world. He's just pretty simple, straightforward dude. While over anxious, overthinking it guy over here, probably Mr. Nice Guy, is like, I need a better laptop. I need better print materials. I need all this. I need better training on how to use said laptop. I need all these things before he can literally walk out the door and start selling stuff. While top performer dude's just like, yeah, see, I'm just going to go out and get a sale, and comes back and hands you a napkin that he was at a bar and he wrote out a deal on a napkin and says, here, put that in the system. I just sold a $500 to $1,000 piece of equipment. There's the guy's email and his number. What is this? It's like, yeah, I sold a big giant piece of equipment with a napkin. Yeah, that's all it takes. I've been working this guy for 3 months and he finally pulled the trigger. While this guy over here is just saying, one of these days I'm going to have everything I need to succeed. That's how analogous, or how much that compares to the romance game as well. As I can't go out and date, post divorce, because the only men that women want are guys that are so tall, make so much money, yada yada. I have no chance. I need to do this, and this first. And maybe after I lose 10 pounds, I can go out. Versus the guy who's very low anxiety, very not Mr. Nice Guy, just goes out and does it. There's something to be learned from those guys. Just go out and do it. Get out of your head. And this nice guy thing bleeds over into a lot of different facets of our life. Looking here to see. Yeah, I believe we answered, Jack, Fight for a Better Now's comment there about basically rebuilding yourself. And later in life, implementing some of these things for sure. The shed movement. I'm not familiar with the shed movement. I don't know if that rings any bells to you, Miss Ashley. They're talking about the shed movement. No, that's new to me. Just making sure I'm not missing anything here, folks. Bear with me as I scroll. Any advice where the psyche is more literally fractured? DID? Are you familiar with what he's talking about when he says DID? Inner little boy is the personality alter.
Yeah, dissociative identity disorder.
Okay, yes.
What's the question exactly?
Any advice where it's literally fractured? You have guys that dissociative disorder that you see, where their inner little boy is literally like I guess the personality. Are you dealing with this much? That's kind of a getting in deep in the woods psychology wise, and maybe a good lead into this question. We see this often. I don't know how often you are telling men that you talk to. You may want to go talk to somebody, outside of my little world. Therapy, something like that. You're showing signs of pretty severe anxiety, depression, and so forth. This is kind of outside of my purview, Mister. Come back to me when you work through those issues. How often you see that? And I think something like dissociative identity disorder would fall under that.
Yeah, for sure. So something I recommend for a lot of my clients who have severe childhood trauma, even or especially childhood trauma they can't remember, but they're showing all the symptoms of severe childhood trauma. This happens a lot with sexual trauma, like men who are showing symptoms of potential sexual trauma. I don't necessarily suggest that to them, but in my mind, that's what I'm thinking, right? When they start telling me I'm a sex addict or I'm addicted to porn, or when someone, tries to love me, I just completely sabotage it and kind of, yeah, it's just my mind just starts to go, there's something going on here, something a lot deeper. And when those things start to stack up, when it's not just one or two issues, it's multiple. And I recommend EMDR to them because the last thing I think that men want to do is sit in therapy for years and years and years. And men process, again, going back to our biological differences, we process emotions differently. So women, we process through talking, and men somewhat. I mean, that certainly can help for some men, but not for all. And so that model is pretty feminized in terms of how it, the approach is. And what I like about EMDR is that it's to the point. What they do is they keep your conscious mind engaged while they access your unconscious mind, so they can actually have a conversation with your unconscious mind, which, by the way, is responsible for 95% of your behavior. So it's very important to figure out what's going on in your unconscious mind, but our conscious mind won't often let us. Like it's hard to access. And so having someone who knows how to access your, let's just say, computer program that was developed mostly between 0 and 8 years old, stuff that you don't even remember, right? Beliefs that you developed as a child that you don't even remember. So someone who can directly access that and start to help you rewire it, that saves you so much time than having to sit and look for it and sort through it when you may have cognitive dissonance and your brain just does not want you to go there. It feels too unsafe. And you'll spin your wheels in therapy for years until you know how to directly access the unconscious mind, which EMDR is fantastic at doing. It's also helpful for retrieving memories. So again, if sometimes things are so traumatic we don't remember them. And so if you're seeing all the symptoms but you don't have the memory, it helps you retrieve the memory and know exactly maybe what happened or what's causing these behaviors. I've seen it with a lot of my clients who they're just chronically, no matter what we do from a coaching perspective, still anxious, still depressed, still have addictions. They're doing everything. They're, going to the gym, or they are cleaning up their diet, or they're setting boundaries, and they're doing these things. But it's almost like no matter what they do, they just keep, finding themselves going back to essentially old coping mechanisms. Their unconscious mind is trying to keep them safe. And it's terrified of change. It's terrified of being vulnerable. And leadership is vulnerable. Masculinity is vulnerable in and of itself because you're putting yourself out there. You have to approach, right? And you have to make the decision and hope that it's the right one, right? And so the brain is so terrified of that level of taking up space and being vulnerable, making decisions, setting boundaries, that it will default and continue to default until you actually fix the root cause of what the brain is so terrified of, because it has one job, and that's to keep you alive.
Another layer of complexity to this, something that we've noticed in our world, I don't know if you see it in yours as well, is we have a disproportionately large number of guys that have been formally diagnosed as being neurodivergent. So you'll have ADHD on the autism spectrum and so forth. We see a lot of that, and I'm sure you do too. So that's a whole other level of complexity there. And it is a spectrum. So some are, quote unquote, worse than others. There are guys on the autism spectrum that have lived their whole lives and had no idea. While there are others that are like, something is most definitely, quote unquote, wrong here. I have a difficult time in relationships with empathy and so forth. And that's a whole other series of challenges there. But we see, quite often, and it's very often that I'll hear men tell me, I haven't diagnosed men, but I've helped point them in the direction of, have you ever considered ADHD or something? Because you're ringing a lot of bells here, mister. And they'll go and get formalized testing and come back and say, I'll be darned, that was it. And now I'm on a pill or a stimulant or something that's helping me keep focus and do everything. And this has just been a godsend to me. So for a lot of those guys, I say, time out. Let's go talk to somebody else about this. I'm not a licensed medical anything. So, but we see that quite a bit. And some of the things that trigger me to go, and this sounds terrible, but if you have a child who is on the autism spectrum, for example, the chances of them coming from a mother, father, or extended family, or somebody is also on the autism spectrum, is very high. So that's usually an indicator of, is it you or the wife that is on the spectrum, or both? And then, the things of, I have nothing but a lot of relationship problems. These men will tell me I get very, very hyper-focused on certain hobbies and interests to the detriment of everything else. I'll just dive into topic XYZ and not come up for breath. I'll forget to eat and drink and sleep and everything else. And it's like, that's a pretty big indicator. That's not your neurotypical trait. So a lot of guys probably listening to that going, it sounds like me. If that does sound like you guys, there's a lot of help and a lot of things out there for guys like you. Doesn't mean you're broken, crazy, or whatever. It just means you're wired a little differently. And if you can get help with that, and it may come in the form of therapy, it may come in the form of some kind of pharmaceutical help, that may be a big thing to help get you up over the wall. And then you can work with people like us to help you along further. But have you seen that a lot with the neurodivergent community in your world?
Absolutely. More ADHD than autism. But I would say, gosh, over 90% of my clients have ADHD.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah. I'm like, there needs to be a study on this. It's like, what is going on with nice guy syndrome and ADHD? And they've been, diagnosed, right? So they're coming in saying, I'm taking medicine, or I've been diagnosed, And I'll say two sort of symptoms or signs of ADHD that you don't often hear a lot about are them staying up late a lot. And apparently it's because there's less stimulus, so they can think better, right? Like it's their only quiet time. And then two, to your point, not just hyper-focused on hobbies, but also women. So the men who are dating, they'll go fast and heavy, and it feels like love bombing to the woman. But really what it is hyper-focus, and then eventually they lose interest. And the woman goes, what happened? It was awesome. You said all these things. I thought we were going to be together forever. Like you were so into me. You were calling me all the time, and you were paying attention to every little thing that I said, and that sort of thing. And really gets her hopes up. And then eventually he just gets bored with it and wants to move on to the next thing. And some people will, start to beat themselves up for that. And go, oh, I'm such a jerk. Why does this always happen? Or the women, obviously, will say something like that too. But really, it could just be a symptom of ADHD, and something that you have to be really mindful of. I will have to slow my clients down sometimes if they have ADHD and they're dating, and help them be very mindful and help them pace the relationship appropriately. And really kind of like give it some time to see how they really feel about the person. Is it just a dopamine rush, or are you really, really invested in this person and in alignment with them?
They fall fast, they fall hard, and they don't take rejection well at all. They're very rejection sensitive. So that's a very lethal combination for getting into a relationship and jumping into the dating world immediately after a divorce. That's why I tell guys, maybe take a year off from relationships completely. Just work on yourself. Don't go jumping into things, because you're just going to jump right into chaos all over again. You're going to fall in love with the first woman that makes goo-goo eyes at you. And we're talking about, there is also another aspect to the ADHD world, which isn't so nice, and it's certainly not the most politically correct thing to talk about, which is, your psychologist would call it hypersexuality. They want it, and they want it a lot and often, and it's never quite enough. I wrote a book about sexless marriages years ago called The Dead Bedroom Fix. So I get a lot of men to me and from that world about, I want to talk about my sexless marriage. And we have guys that do better as a result of working with me, and they'll go from, I was a once a month kind of guy to 3 times a week kind of guy. I'm like, that's a huge percentage jump. Hallelujah. High five. I guess we're done here. Well, not so fast. Because now I want insert some kind of pornographic activity here, like threesomes and all this other kind of stuff. You're like, okay, dude, what's going on here? And sure enough, it's the ADHD thing, the neurodivergent thing. It lends itself to that. So if that sounds familiar to any of you guys, yet another thing to think about there. So I don't want to keep you too much longer. We've already been an hour. One more time, Ashley, how can folks work with you? How can we find out more about you?
Yeah. So niceguyreformschool.com or at Nice Guy Reform School on TikTok or Instagram.
I'm going to put that in the chat here in the comments. Niceguyreformschool.com. Excellent domain, by the way.
Thank you.
There it goes.
Yeah,
Nice
there's a diagnostic test if they're curious if they have nice guy syndrome or not.
You guys check it out. Check out Miss Ashley on Instagram. That's how we bumped into each other on Instagram. And check out niceguyreformschool.com. I'm sure a lot of you guys are listening to this and nodding. Go check out Miss Ashley's material. It is wonderful. Ashley, you're doing good stuff. Keep it up. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for being with us here today. I appreciate you. And guys, thank you for the comments. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything important here before we wrap her up. I think we got everything. Looks like a lot of guys are chatting amongst themselves here in the comments, which is cool. I like it. So, but thank you. Thank you guys for joining us. And once again, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, Ralph.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you guys. Thank you for joining us. Bye-bye.